Welcome to this deep dive, and we're going to be looking at some texts you might not have heard of.
Okay.
The Apocrypha.
Oh, very cool.
They're these books that almost made it into the Bible.
Yeah.
And they're full of these really captivating stories, philosophical ideas,
Right.
and historical accounts that I think really kind of give us
Uh-huh.
a whole new way to look at both the Old and New Testaments.
Yeah, it's like finding a lost chapter to like your favorite book.
Right.
And suddenly you've got this whole new perspective on characters and events you thought you knew.
Yeah.
And these texts really offer like a window
Right.
into the world of Jewish thought
Yeah.
and practice during the centuries between the Old and New Testaments.
Okay, so to guide us through this world, we're using the apocryphal books of the Old and New Testament by Professor H.T. Andrews.
Great.
So first things first,
Yeah.
what is the Apocrypha?
So the Apocrypha, it's a collection of texts written during what we call the intertestamental period.
And that's those centuries between the Hebrew Bible
Right.
and the Christian New Testament.
Okay.
And you can imagine it was a time of just immense change, like empires.
Yeah.
Rising and falling, new ideas.
Oh, yeah.
And, within all of this, you had Jewish thinkers and writers grappling with
Right.
questions about faith, identity,
Right.
place in the world.
Yeah, no, that's a crazy time
Yeah.
for those sorts of ideas.
A pressure cooker
Yeah, it really is.
of ideas.
Professor Andrews even mentions everything from like historical accounts
Right.
to philosophical treatises to even religious romances.
That's right.
Wow.
And that's one of the key reasons why, understanding the Apocrypha is so important.
Mhm.
It really challenges this notion
Yeah.
that there was like one Jewish worldview at the time.
Right.
Instead, we see all of these different perspectives,
Yeah.
often like in debate with each other.
So it wasn't just a straightforward path from the Old Testament to the New.
No, not at all. There were these like detours and side roads.
Absolutely.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so valuable.
Yeah.
It gives us a glimpse into this complex landscape of religious thought
Yeah.
during this really pivotal time in history.
Okay, so these books were written by Jewish authors during this time,
Yeah,
but they didn't ultimately make it into the Hebrew Bible.
right.
Why is that?
Well, that's where we get this debate
Okay.
about canonization.
Right.
And it's sort of like, y- not every song that's written makes it onto like the greatest hits album.
Right.
In the same way, not every religious text makes it into what we consider like the official canon of
Something.
Scripture.
So how does a book become a greatest hit then?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Scholars have debated this for centuries,
Hmm.
but in the case of the Hebrew Bible,
Yeah.
there were evolving criteria over time.
Okay.
Authorship, historical context,
Yeah.
theological consistency, community acceptance.
So even back then, it wasn't a like yes or no
Exactly.
black and white decision.
Uh-huh.
There was this nuance and this debate over which texts were considered sacred.
Yeah, and those debates continue.
Really?
Even today,
Wow.
with different branches of Christianity
Okay.
having different views on the Apocrypha.
Mm.
For example, the Catholic Church includes most of these books in their Bible,
Okay.
while Protestant denominations generally don't.
That's so interesting how
Yeah.
that, what we consider scripture
Right.
is really just the result of all these historical processes
Uh-huh.
and theological interpretations.
Exactly.
So it's not as simple as we often think of it.
No, it's really not.
Wow. Okay, well, let's get back to the Apocrypha.
Sure.
Why should we,
Yeah.
in the 21st century, care about these texts that didn't even make it in the Bible?
Well, it's a great question.
Yeah.
And I think there are several reasons why they're really relevant,
Okay.
even if you don't consider them scripture. First, they offer this invaluable context for understanding the world of both the Old and New Testaments.
Right.
It's like you wouldn't fully understand the impact of a Shakespearean play
Yeah.
without knowing something about Elizabethan England.
Okay, so we're getting the behind-the-scenes backstory that helps us make sense of the main event.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And that's especially true when we're trying to understand
Okay.
early Christianity.
Yeah.
Many scholars believe that the Apocrypha
Right.
really influenced Christian thought.
Wow.
And we see echoes of these texts in the early church fathers,
Yeah.
even in the New Testament itself.
So it's not just this separate collection of stories.
Yeah.
It's really interwoven
Yeah,
with the story of Christianity
absolutely.
that changes things.
Yeah.
how I view it.
It really does.
Okay, so
And then beyond that,
yeah.
I mean, these texts are just fascinating
Yeah.
on their own,
Okay.
filled with stories,
Yeah.
philosophical reflections,
Right.
even a touch of romance.
Okay, religious romances.
Yeah.
Now you've got my attention.
Just wait till we get to Judith and Tobit.
Okay.
Those are stories you won't forget.
All right. I'm ready to be swept off my feet
Oh, okay.
by ancient religious romance.
All right.
But before we get lost in the stories,
Yeah.
let's start with one that Professor Andrews really highlights as significant.
Okay.
First Maccabees.
Great.
It sounds like a real epic.
It is.
Okay.
It's a tale of courage,
Yes.
resistance,
Yeah.
religious freedom, kind of like Braveheart,
Okay.
set in ancient Judea.
I like it.
And First Maccabees tells the story of the Maccabean revolt.
Yeah.
And this was a pivotal moment in Jewish history. It all began when this ruler named Antiochus Epiphanes,
Okay.
who was influenced by Hellenistic culture.
Hold on. Hellenistic culture?
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
So Hellenistic refers to the spread of Greek culture
Okay.
following the conquests of Alexander the Great.
Right.
So you can imagine Greek language, art, philosophy,
Right.
religious practices, all blending with local traditions throughout the Mediterranean, including Judea.
Okay.
And Antiochus Epiphanes was trying to impose this Hellenistic culture
Right.
on the Jewish people.
So it was about more than just political control.
Exactly.
It was cultural and religious domination.
That's right.
Wow.
And this sparked a fierce resistance movement led by the Maccabees,
Okay.
who were a family of Jewish priests
Right?
who refused to compromise their faith.
So we're talking about like a real clash of civilizations here.
It was.
And this book captures that.
Absolutely.
Okay, wow.
It's full of battles, political intrigue,
Wow.
even martyrdom.
Okay, I'm definitely adding 1 Maccabees
Yeah.
to my reading list.
It's a good one.
But what about 2 Maccabees?
Okay, so 2 Maccabees
Yeah.
is like the more dramatic,
Okay.
spiritually focused retelling of some of the same events. It covers a shorter time period than 1 Maccabees,
Right.
and it focuses more on
Right.
God's intervention in the lives of the Jewish people.
So if 1 Maccabees is like Braveheart,
Okay.
and 2 Maccabees is more like
Hmm?
Chariots of Fire meets the 10 Commandments.
You could say that.
Okay.
Yeah, it really highlights these miracles,
Okay.
divine retribution,
Right.
this unwavering belief in God's power
Okay.
to deliver his people.
And you said it's not considered to be as historically accurate.
Well, that's right.
Okay.
While 1 Maccabees, aims for historical detail,
Right.
2 Maccabees really leans into theological messaging.
Okay.
It's more about emphasizing faith
Right.
and divine power
Hmm.
than providing a precise historical record.
That's interesting. So even within the Apocrypha,
Yeah,
we see these different approaches to
absolutely.
storytelling,
Yeah.
and historical accounts.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so fascinating.
Right.
It challenges us to consider
Right.
different perspectives and just appreciate that.
Richness and diversity of thought.
Now, you mentioned earlier that the Apocrypha grapples with philosophical questions, and Professor Andrews highlights 1 book,
Okay.
the Book of Wisdom,
Yes.
as a key example.
It's a good one.
What makes this book so compelling?
So the Book of Wisdom, it's a beautiful and profound exploration of wisdom, righteousness, the nature of God.
Okay.
It delves into those questions
Yeah.
that humans have always asked, like,
Yeah.
why do bad things happen to good people?
Right.
What's the meaning of life? Is there life after death?
These are questions that still keep us up at night.
Right.
Yeah.
And the Book of Wisdom approaches them
Okay.
in a way that's both philosophical and deeply personal.
Mm.
And it presents wisdom as this divine gift that
Yeah.
guides us through life,
Yeah.
leads us toward righteousness and ultimately
Okay.
immortality.
Mm.
What's really fascinating, though,
Is that many scholars see the Book of Wisdom
okay,
as having this direct influence on the Apostle Paul's writings.
wow, okay,
Yeah. For example, Paul's concept of grace,
right,
his understanding of the afterlife.
yeah,
These seem to echo
wow.
themes from the Book of Wisdom.
So we're not just talking about ancient philosophy.
Right.
We're talking about ideas that shaped
Yeah.
the foundation of Christian theology.
Exactly.
That's mind-blowing.
Yeah, and that's why
Yeah,
delving into the Apocrypha,
right,
it's not just an academic exercise. It's about rediscovering these lost connections,
okay,
deepening our understanding of faith,
yeah.
and even rethinking our assumptions
Oh, yeah.
of the Bible
Yeah.
and its history.
My understanding of early Christianity is already expanding. God, we haven't even gotten to those religious romances yet.
We'll get there.
Okay.
Don't worry.
But first, there's another fascinating aspect of the Apocrypha we need to explore. The stories of courage and resilience found in books like Judith and Tobit.
Great.
Okay, lead the way.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we've explored that historical backdrop of the Apocrypha.
Okay.
We delved into that drama of the Maccabean revolt.
Yeah.
And we even talked about the Book of Wisdom.
Uh-huh.
But now I'm ready for something a little more exciting.
Right.
Professor Andrews mentions these books, Judith and Tobit, as being like action-adventure stories.
He's not kidding.
Okay, so
these are the types of stories that would keep people on the edge of their seats back then.
Okay.
Just like a good movie does for us today.
All right, so first up is Judith.
Okay.
What's her story all about?
So Judith is a widow.
Okay.
Strong, beautiful, and deeply devout.
Hmm.
Her city is under siege.
Okay.
By this powerful Assyrian general Holofernes.
Right.
And things are looking pretty bad. But Judith comes up with this daring plan.
Okay. I'm already intrigued.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of plan are we talking? Does she lead a rebellion?
Well, not exactly.
Okay.
Judith uses her cunning and her charm to infiltrate the enemy camp.
Wow.
She gains Holofernes' trust.
Okay.
And then, well, let's just say she takes matters into her own hands.
Okay. Now, I really need to hear this whole story.
Yeah.
She sounds like a biblical Wonder Woman.
Right.
Professor Andrews even compares her to the Greek heroine Athena.
Yeah, there are definitely some parallels there.
Right.
You know, both Judith and Athena are seen as these symbols of wisdom, courage, and strategic brilliance.
Okay.
But what makes Judith so fascinating is that she embodies this very specific kind of Jewish piety. You know, she's not just fighting for her people. She's fighting for her faith.
Right.
The preservation of Jewish traditions.
So she's not just a warrior.
Right.
She's a defender of her faith.
Exactly.
Right.
And, you know, her story raises these really interesting questions.
Yeah, like what?
About, you know, what it means to be faithful in times of crisis.
Right.
Can faith be reconciled with acts of violence?
Right.
Is there a line between what's divinely sanctioned and what's considered morally acceptable?
Those are questions that people grappled with back then.
Yeah, and we still grapple with them today.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about Tobit?
All right, so Tobit.
Yeah?
This is more of a heartwarming family drama.
Okay.
But with some supernatural twists.
Oh, okay. I like it.
He's a devout Jew living in exile.
Okay.
Known for his generosity and his unwavering faith, even when things are really tough.
Okay.
And the story follows Tobit, his son Tobias, and this rather intriguing traveling companion.
Okay, a traveling companion.
Yeah.
Now I'm picturing like a buddy comedy set in ancient times. Who is this mysterious companion?
Let's just say it's not your average travel buddy.
Yeah.
It's an angel in disguise.
Whoa.
Named Raphael, sent by God to guide and protect Tobias.
On this perilous journey.
An angel in disguise.
Yeah.
This is getting good.
Right.
What's the purpose of this journey?
So Tobias is sent to collect a debt owed to his father. But along the way, he faces danger, falls in love, and ultimately, with Raphael's help, overcomes these seemingly impossible obstacles.
Okay, I'm adding Tobit to my reading list right after Judith.
It's a good one.
It sounds like the perfect blend of adventure,
yeah,
romance, and divine intervention.
It's a great story that reminds us of the importance of faith, perseverance, and trusting in God's plan.
Even when things seem dark.
Even when things are tough.
Okay, so we've got these captivating narratives.
Yes.
But Professor Andrews also points out that there's this strong philosophical thread running through the Apocrypha, and he highlights Ecclesiasticus as being really insightful.
It's a great book.
What's the focus of this book? So Ecclesiasticus, it's kind of like a collection of wisdom sayings and practical advice for living a good life.
Okay, so it's like the ancient equivalent of a self-help book.
Yeah.
But with a spiritual foundation.
Exactly.
Give me an example of the kind of wisdom we find in this book.
Sure. So there's this passage
that
says, "Do not exalt yourself in the plan of your soul, for to God alone belongs the plan of the heart."
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It reminds us to stay humble.
Yeah.
And trust in a power greater than ourselves.
Exactly.
Right.
Ecclesiasticus really emphasizes humility, generosity, respect for parents, hard work, living a life that's pleasing to God.
That sounds like a timeless message.
It is.
It's still relevant.
Absolutely.
For us today.
Yeah, it's a reminder that wisdom transcends cultural boundaries. Speaks to something deep within us.
So we've got history, philosophy, romance.
Right. Yeah, the Apocrypha has it all.
It really does. Yeah. But Professor Andrews also mentions some books that delve into apocalyptic visions and prophecies. Yeah. Baruch and Enoch.
Right.
Those sound pretty intense.
They are. Okay. Apocalyptic literature was a big deal during this time. And these books give us a look into the anxieties and hopes of people living under foreign rule, longing for a better future.
So what kind of visions do we find in these books?
Well, you've got visions of angels and demons, cosmic battles between good and evil, pronouncements of judgment, promises of a future kingdom.
Okay, are we talking fire and brimstone?
Oh, there's some of that for sure.
Okay.
But it's important to remember that apocalyptic literature, it wasn't just about predicting the future.
What else was it about then?
It was a way of expressing resistance against oppressive powers, a way of affirming faith in God's ultimate justice and control.
So it was a way of finding hope and meaning.
Exactly.
In the midst of challenging times.
Yeah, even though the language and imagery might seem strange to us, the underlying themes of hope, justice, divine intervention, these still resonate.
They do. It makes you think about how people throughout history have turned to faith to cope with uncertainty and suffering.
Absolutely.
But okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
How do these apocalyptic visions fit into this bigger picture of the Apocrypha?
Well, they remind us that the Jewish people at this time, they were living in a world of tremendous change and upheaval. They were grappling with questions about their identity, their faith, their future. And apocalyptic literature gave them a way to process those anxieties, to affirm their belief in a God who would ultimately triumph.
So it wasn't just about predicting the end of the world. It was about finding meaning and hope in a world that often felt like it was falling apart.
Exactly.
That search for meaning, that longing for something beyond the present that connects us to those who wrote these texts.
Yeah, we're not so different.
No, we're not.
From those who came before us.
I'm curious, Professor Andrews mentions this whole other layer to the Apocrypha. A collection of even more obscure texts that he calls the wider Apocrypha.
That's right.
What can you tell us about those?
Well, that's where we venture into even more uncharted territory. And trust me, it's going to get even more fascinating.
I'm ready to dive deeper.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we've gone through these tales of courage. We've looked at philosophical wisdom. And even seen these apocalyptic visions. But now, with Professor Andrews, we're venturing into this even more mysterious realm of the wider Apocrypha.
The wider Apocrypha.
What exactly are we talking about here?
So think of it like this. If the Apocrypha is like finding a hidden room in an old house, the wider Apocrypha is like finding a secret passage to an even more hidden chamber.
So we're talking about the truly underground scene.
Yeah, we're going deep.
Of ancient religious thought.
Deep cuts.
What kind of ideas were they exploring?
That
pushed those boundaries?
One of the themes that we see in a lot of these texts is this fascination with the mystical and the esoteric. They get into angelic hierarchies. Secret knowledge. Even journeys to heaven and hell.
Wow, okay, so we're stepping into this world of celestial beings.
Yeah, we're going full on.
Hidden realms.
Mystical.
A touch of magic.
Maybe a little bit of magic.
This is definitely the most intriguing deep dive yet. Professor Andrews mentions a book called The Assumption of Moses. What makes that one stand out?
So the Assumption of Moses is really interesting because it takes a different approach to Jewish resistance than we saw in First Maccabees. Remember, the Maccabees fought back against oppression with military force?
Yeah, with violence.
But the Assumption of Moses advocates for a kind of passive resistance. It urges Jews to endure persecution and trust in God's judgment.
So it's like a philosophical debate within the Apocrypha itself.
Two different sides of the same coin.
Fight or flight, action or endurance.
Exactly.
That's really thought-provoking.
Yeah.
What was the reasoning behind this passive resistance?
So the assumption of Moses really presents this worldview where God is in complete control of history. And it argues that human attempts to fight back against injustice are going to be pointless.
Wow.
True liberation will only come through divine intervention.
So you have to have that patience and faith.
That's right.
And belief that God will ultimately vindicate his people.
Exactly.
It makes you think about how different people can have these vastly different interpretations of how to respond to suffering and injustice.
Absolutely.
Speaking of different perspectives. Professor Andrews also mentions the Book of Jubilees, which seems to offer this retelling.
It's like a remix
of familiar biblical stories. What's its angle?
So the Book of Jubilees is like a rewrite of Genesis, but it's got a very specific agenda. It really emphasizes observing the law, particularly the Sabbath, and the dietary laws. It portrays figures like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as being really strict about these laws.
So it's almost like this reinterpretation of history
to
support a particular set of beliefs.
You could see it that way.
It almost sounds like a form of ancient propaganda.
It highlights how even sacred texts can be reinterpreted and repurposed to serve different agendas.
It reminds us to be critical readers, even when we're engaging with texts that claim authority.
That's a great point.
It's so easy to take things at face value. But we really need to...
It's so easy to take things at face value, but...
The author's intentions, the message is being conveyed.
Totally.
Okay, so we've got passive resistance, mystical visions, reinterpreted history. Professor Andrews mentions one more book from the wider Apocrypha that I'm really curious about. The Testaments of the 12 Patriarchs. What's that one all about?
So the Testaments of the 12 Patriarchs is this collection of ethical teachings attributed to the 12 sons of Jacob. So imagine each of these sons offering like final words of wisdom to their descendants, covering things like forgiveness, brotherly love, the dangers of sin.
So it's kind of like this last lecture series?
They're like a last lecture series.
With a biblical twist.
With a biblical twist, exactly.
What makes these teachings stand out?
What's remarkable is the emphasis on unity. And even this call for inclusivity. And remember, this is a time when tensions were high between Jews and Gentiles.
Of course.
But the testaments of the 12 patriarchs, it encourages Jews to live in harmony, not only with each other, but also with Gentiles.
A message of inclusivity amidst a climate of division? That's pretty radical.
Yeah, it's pretty its time.
Countercultural.
What's the reasoning behind that message?
Well, it reflects this belief that God's ultimate plan includes the salvation of all people.
Not just...
not just a select few.
The chosen people.
It encourages compassion. Understanding. Recognizing our shared humanity.
That's a message that still resonates.
It does.
Deeply today.
It really does.
Especially in a world that feels so divided.
Yeah, it's a reminder that these ancient texts, even the ones that were overlooked, they can offer us this timeless wisdom.
And challenge us to live more ethically.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great way to conclude our exploration of the Apocrypha and the wider Apocrypha. These texts, once hidden in the shadows, offer all these insights into the history of religion. The complexities of faith. The enduring search for meaning.
It's been an incredible journey.
It has.
It really has, full of these surprising twists and these thought-provoking ideas. I feel like I have this whole new appreciation. Good.
For Jewish thought and practice during this time.
And I hope it inspires you to keep exploring, Even though we've reached the end of this deep dive, the journey never really ends. There's always more to learn, more to uncover, more to be amazed by.
So to all our listeners out there, don't be afraid to venture beyond the familiar.
Go explore.
Crack open one of these books. Even if it's just a few excerpts.
Just dip your toes in.
You might be surprised.
You might be surprised.
At what you discover. And how it might change your perspective on the world.
Absolutely.
On faith. And even on yourself.
That's right.